The idea that people who are confusing our kids on the transgender issue, that they care more about our kids than we do, it's basically communist. In other words, it's basically where the state says, we own your kids. Hitler says, I own your kids. I will teach your kids to love the Nazi state, to love the Fuhrer. And if you disagree with your kids on that, I will teach your kids to hate you. Before we get into our conversation, my name is Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. He's the Oklahoma State superintendent over all the schools. That's an elected office where normal parents can elect a sensible human being to help oversee education. Kind of makes me want to move to Oklahoma. Ryan Walters, welcome to this program.
I sure appreciate you having me. I love the work that you're doing. You know, here in Oklahoma, we're trying to get education back on track by protecting parents' rights, getting school choice done, and then honestly, bringing prayer, God back to schools. We've seen this woke agenda being pushed on our schools. It's time to go back to common sense and the type of schools that, frankly, the country had decades ago. It's time to bring it back to that.
Well, it's interesting because we're living in a time, I keep saying this, where we've drifted over the decades where many people, they don't get the basics. The basics, just to frame it for my audience, is that, ladies and gentlemen, you're free. And the government can't tell you anything, basically. You can raise your kids as you like. Most parents say, well, I'm going to send my kids to the schoolhouse. We're going to hire a teacher to teach my kids what I think they should know. And the teacher's paid by me, paid by my taxes, and the teacher doesn't have the authority to do whatever they like. They're paid by me. So if they get out of line and start teaching insanity or communism or atheistic lunacy or wokeness, I would say, well, you know what? That's not what I'm paying for. It's not what I'm looking for. Goodbye. Thank you very much. We're at a point now where you have a lot of parents, a lot of Americans that are ignorant. They don't seem to understand that according to not just our traditions, but our founding documents and our laws, the parents have authority over their kids. And we saw it happen. This is what elected Governor Youngkin in Virginia. When you have people that see the government as more important to our kids than parents, which I got to tell you, folks, is amazing and deeply sick. And so we need to bring back, common sense on this issue. So it is great, as I said, Ryan Walters, to know that you are where you are in Oklahoma and that you understand this stuff. It's it's a breath of fresh air to think that you're doing that.
Well, and you just said that very well. And because of where we are today, 40 or 50 years ago, you might not have needed statutes that clarify parents are the rightful overviewers of their kids. God gave kids to a mom and a dad, not the government. So their rights are to be protected in every aspect of their kids' education.
You wouldn't have needed that 10 years ago. This is the most recent insanity. When I heard this, there's certain things you hear and they just they spin you upside down. It's kind of when I heard people say we need to defund the police. I thought, what? That's the dumbest, craziest thing I ever heard. What are you talking about? When people have to assert that parents have rights over the kids, you know how dark things are. I remember I was at some event. Rick DeSantis was talking and saying I'm for, girls in high school only competing against other girls. And we're all cheering. And I thought, what are we cheering? How crazy that someone needs to say this. But that's basically where we are. So, of course, I applaud you for this. But it's kind of amazing that we've drifted so far that we have to assert the most extremely basic things.
And frankly, we have to institutionalize these things through rules, through laws, because the reality is we passed a Parents' Bill of Rights here through my board, and immediately we had associations, the Counselors Association. We had folks from our schools that came out to fight the rule and say, well, really, we need to be the ones making a lot of these decisions. There's a lot of bad parents out there, and really, we need to be the ones that make the call of should they be exposed to. We're talking about transgenderism, talking to kids about changing their sex, and even in a red state like Oklahoma, we had to fight back against these establishment groups that truly believe they own the kids. I mean, that they believe,
yeah.
and I put them on the spot and go, listen, I got 4 little ones. Do you think that there's anyone in this world that loves my kids and understands my kids better than my wife and myself? That is an absurd position that you guys are holding. But I mean, it is prominent in the left-wing circles today.
Well, the first time I smelled this, I'll never forget, probably maybe 15 years ago, my daughter, we had to take her to a hospital here in New York, and some high-handed nurse figure kind of treated me as the father, kind of like incidental, like, well, let me talk to your daughter. And I thought, like, I'm ready to choke somebody who's going to come between me and my child. It is deeply offensive that anybody would even suggest that parents are a threat to their children. I mean, there are parents that are a threat to their children, and all of us would agree that's like, that's when somebody has to intervene. But the idea that people who are confusing our kids on the transgender issue, that they care more about our kids than we do, that they know better than our kids. Again, this is brand new, and it is, to cut to the chase, folks, it's basically communist. In other words, it's basically where the state says, we own your kids. Hitler says, I own your kids. I will teach your kids to love the Nazi state, to love the Fuhrer. And if you disagree with your kids on that, I will teach your kids to hate you. That has never come to our shores. It is here now. And Ryan Walters, you're one of the brave folks standing up against it. So again, God bless you and thank you. Tell us specifically what's going on right now in Oklahoma.
So a couple of things we're doing. And again, we put out a rule that said you have to tell parents about any kind of sexual conversation or transgender you can't have them with kids. You can talk to a parent, but you're never going to talk to a kid about these things in the state of Oklahoma. And we recently had a superintendent send out an email to parents saying, actually, still we saw this rule that Ryan Walters pushed through, but we're still going to be the ones that ultimately make the decision of if we're going to tell you first or not. And we let them know, absolutely, you will not. You will always tell the parents first. You are not going to sit here and try to do an end around us. But that does show you, even in a red state, you have superintendents and woke administrators that are even fighting back against the most common sense rules. So we're going to continue to enforce that. You got to protect parents' rights. And the other thing that we're doing, Eric, that I think is so important in what we're seeing in the world today is we are going to bring God back to school. It started in 1962 where we saw the Supreme Court weaponize the federal government against Christians. They struck down any kind of school prayer. And since then, we saw them continue to move and not only drive Christianity from our schools, driving prayer from our schools, they created atheism as a state-sponsored religion. That's really all they want to allow in our schools. And we absolutely have to protect a student's right to pray in a school, a teacher's right to exercise their free expression of their religious beliefs. And the other thing is we're going to make sure our kids understand the Judeo-Christian values this country was founded on. And again, this is history. I know the left hates history. They want to pretend like we're enlightened now and that all of American history was evil and racist. But we've got to get back to a point where our kids understand the core principles of our Constitution, of our Declaration of Independence of this country, and understand that the founders were very clear. Our Judeo-Christian values were crucial in making this experiment we know as America work.
I talk about this all the time. I wrote a book called If You Can Keep It about this very issue. And I myself didn't quite understand how it worked until I wrote that book. And when you understand it, you think, my goodness, I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought that secular is somehow neutral. No, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way you get all the values we have in the West, liberty, the protection of minorities, all of that stuff is biblical. There's no way around it. It's not my opinion. The abolition of slavery came because of serious Christians. The civil rights movement came out of the churches. All the stuff that we say, well, we like this stuff, comes out of Scripture. It comes out of Christians bringing those things into the public sphere, into our founding documents. There's no way around that. And so teaching that in public schools was normative until, as you just said, Ryan Walters, 1962, you could see the shift. And they started to pretend, let's be clear, they started to pretend that you could have this good stuff without God. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't do that. It's like saying you can have physics without math. You cannot do physics without math. You cannot do liberty and America without these founding ideas. You don't have to like the founding ideas. You don't have to be a Christian, but you have to be aware of the history behind it. And again, I wrote about it in my book, If You Can Keep It, because I saw this needs to be understood by every American or we're dead. It is very dramatic to me, when you were talking earlier about there's been an agenda. And again, folks, you need to trace this intellectually. Everybody can understand this, that if you take God out of the picture and you say, we're going to take God out of the picture, what follows is a nightmare. What follows is human beings are not made in the image of God. There's no right or wrong. The idea of liberty is just something we made up. All of this stuff follows from atheism. So what you have is a woke agenda pretending that you could be against racism and be an atheist. But if you're an atheist, you don't believe that God made us equal in his image. You believe that we evolved randomly out of the primordial soup, and therefore maybe some races are more equal than others. So they're gaslighting us. They're pretending that the secular view can give us all the stuff that we like, and we have to be real clear. We have to understand that it can't, and that's why I'm just excited, Ryan, that you in Oklahoma, it needs to happen around the country, are pushing back.
And you see it in, they don't want a fair exchange of ideas. The radical left knows they don't win that battle, right? And this is why, again, you've seen the success of so many conservatives, now in talk radio or writing books, things like this. And again, your successes speak for themselves. But you know what? There's logic to it. It makes sense. People connect with it. And so one of the things we did here in Oklahoma, we have launched and made Prager University available in every school in the state and for every parent to make it available. And again, it's guess what? It's a different perspective. It actually is based in facts. There's no left-wing ideology. I know, Eric, the left has lost their minds here. And it just goes to show you, just showing students, a 5-minute, 10-minute video about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Christopher Columbus, to really flesh out a fact-based understanding of these people who've been incredibly influential in American history. The left doesn't want it. They don't, not even 5 minutes do they want kids exposed. And we're going to continue to make sure we get good curriculum in front of our kids. We just recently told our math book textbook publishers that, guess what? We expect you to teach math. If there's any kind of CRT, social emotional learning, or any more of this left-wing nonsense in there, you're not going to work in the state of Oklahoma. And we had 8 textbook publishers pull out of the process. I'm going, well, you know what? If that standard's too high for you, go out to California, go out to New York. You're not going to work in the state and stick word problems in front of kids in a math class and tell them that they might be racist due to the color of their skin. It's absurd. We're going to focus on the basics. And this is where you notice that from the attacks that we're getting here in Oklahoma, we're right over the target. The left wing wants to fully control what's being said to your kids, and they want it to be indoctrination. They don't want there to be a factually based discussion.
I was just in Illinois, in Chicago. I spoke at an Illinois Family Institute event, and Dr. Erwin Lutzer was there. He has written about the rise of the Nazis. Obviously, I've written about that. But somebody asked a question, and I couldn't really answer the question because, I don't know everything there is to know about what happened in the early days of the Nazis in Germany. But Erwin Lutzer was there, and he said that in the textbooks, when the Nazis took power, they would embed in the math problems this Nazi ideology, and they would kind of be indoctrinating the kids through math. This is what is happening in America today. In other words, you're asking teachers just to teach that kid to play piano, teach him how to do math, teach him how to do a little science, teach him how to basic stuff, but they have an ideology, and that's what they're pushing. They're using education to push ideology. They care about the ideology more than they do about the basics. Now, I got to ask you, Ryan, for folks who don't live in Oklahoma, I tell most people you really should homeschool your kids. Sam Sorbo, if people want resources, go to samsorbo.com. But it seems to me in a place like Oklahoma, there is hope for the public schools because of folks like you.
And look, and I heard that just a few weeks ago, as I'm traveling around the state, I have folks that say, look, I've actually put my kids back in public school because of the work that you're doing here. I know that you're fighting back against this woke agenda. And this is what we've got to do. Look, we have the best homeschool law in the country, by the way. We fully encourage parents, if you're able, we want you to homeschool your kids. The government, we're not going to track you. We're not going to ask a bunch of questions. We're not going to make you turn in data to us. No, we want family units to be protected and encouraged to be the most influential part of a kid's life other than their faith and the role that plays. And so what we do, and I tell our team this, everything we do should be to strengthen the family unit.
There are places like Oklahoma, it seems to me, where you can fight to do what's right in the public schools. A lot of the states around the country, I would say it's mostly a lost cause. I guess maybe it depends on the county or it depends on things. What is your sense of what's possible?
Hey, look, that's what we've done. We have been very aggressive here, get parents' rights protected, drive left-wing indoctrination out of our schools, drive the teachers' unions out of our schools. I mean, I've been really clear on this. They are the tip of the spear for this left-wing ideology. I don't want them in our schools. And so we've been able to recruit teachers from all over the country here that are good conservative folks that want to come in and teach kids the basics without indoctrination. We've put in free market principles like merit pay for teachers. We have that here. We've put in merit pay for tutoring for kids that have fallen behind. Guess what? We pay tutors based on the results of the kids. And so in doing this, what we have is we have recruited good conservative folks that actually believe in exceptionalism in the classroom. And so we've continued to push back and fight back in a way is putting our schools on a trajectory to be successful while protecting parents' rights, while making sure parents are at the center of all decision making. Other states can do this, but guess what? The union's going to come after you. We've been sued by, I don't know, a dozen atheist groups, for talking about religion, heaven forbid. But you've got to stand firm. The people of Oklahoma are behind us. I hear from parents every day that are so happy with the changes we've made. And guess what? We're now recruiting and finding these great teachers that go, listen, we agree completely, but we've been bullied and intimidated by a teachers union. And I've told them I will stand in the way between you and a teachers union, atheist lawyers, and any kind of attack from the Biden administration that comes our way. We're going to stand with parents. We're going to stand for our faith. We're going to stand for our kids.
Well, are there any other states where you see anything like this happening? And you said that you are elected in Oklahoma. You are the state superintendent over all the schools in Oklahoma, and you're elected. So common sense people, parents, can elect someone like you in Oklahoma. Is there anything like this around the country?
Yeah, I was actually just with some of my colleagues in Iowa with Governor Kim Reynolds, and I was there with the commissioner from Florida, from Arkansas. They are two of the best out there. South Carolina is doing a lot of this great work as well. So we do have a core group of some really great conservative education leaders that are out there, fighting back. And this is what we continue to. I was able to tell Oklahoma's story up there in Iowa and say, look, here's how we're leading on this. Again, I mean, the left has come at me. They tried to impeach me, didn't go anywhere. They sue me every week. I tell them I'm not going to back down. They show up at my board meetings yelling and screaming. But the reality is we are in line with parents. We are in line with Oklahoma values and, frankly, just American values. But what you're seeing, the left is used to bullying and intimidating and threatening and getting their way, even in red states. We have to have elected officials that stand firm. We got to get the rhinos out of office, get true believers in there who believe in American exceptionalism, who believes in these Judeo-Christian values that the country was founded on. And let's go fight and win this war. It is a war. It is a spiritual war for the future of this country and for our kids. We have to win this one.
Look, I could not agree with you more. It's shocking and thrilling to hear someone like you understand where we are and what we need to do. It gives me hope for America. I hope it gives my audience hope for America. This is vital. This is central. Now, you mentioned the teachers' unions. They are the enemy of children. They're the enemy of American parents. How did it get to where the teachers' union became the enemies of American values, of families, of parents? It's just madness. How did that happen?
Right. The teachers' unions, And, and this is the thing that they try to hide in red states what their goals are. One of the things we did in Oklahoma is we just put together a montage of the things they say at their national conference. The teachers union, what they ultimately want is power and money. That's all they care about, power and money, and driving a left-wing Marxist agenda. You look at the donations from the teachers union, you look at the political donations, you look at the races they play in. They spent millions of dollars against me. They want to break down the family. They want to destroy our school system and our traditional values. And so all they do is take money from teachers, bully and intimidate them into joining, and then they use those dollars to politically intimidate legislators and also folks in positions like mine. And again, just so your audience can kind of see this, what they had done previously in red state like Oklahoma, we've got a conservative legislature. They passed laws banning critical race theory and things like that I was pushing for. But before me, we had a Democrat state superintendent who just refused to enforce those laws. If you control the state education agency, you can ban critical race theory. You can say boys can't go in girls' bathrooms. But if you have a Democrat at the head of these entities, or just a rhino, they just won't enforce it. It's very much the George Soros playbook. Hey, controlled district attorneys, so you can pass whatever laws you want, we just won't enforce them. They have taken the same track with education, which is why you continue to see movement, but not action to actually change schools. That's one of the things we've done, Eric. Hey, teachers, we tell them, we pulled teaching certificates from teachers who have openly said, we're going to keep teaching critical race theory. What are you going to do about it? We said, well, you're not going to teach here in our state then. School districts have pushed it. We said, we're not going to accredit you then. You won't be a school anymore. So that's where you've got to use the powers that have been given over to education agencies and say, when we say no critical race theory in Oklahoma, we mean it. You're not going to do it. You can't have our kids.
Well, what it takes is leadership. And by God's grace, you are leading in the way that we need to lead. We've got one segment coming up after this. We just got 30 seconds left in this segment. Let me just ask you real quick. I think the next president and Congress need to defund the Federal Department of Education. What business does the federal government have telling us how to educate our kids?
So, I want to say, we've got to block the left-wing indoctrination from getting into our schools, but we have to play offense. The left knows this is the final stage of their war for our country. They control the schools. They already control corporate media. They control pop culture. They control higher ed. All we've got left is our faith institutions, and we're fighting back in K-12. And what we have to do is put good curriculum in there. That's why I talked about PragerU. We're working on making sure we're actually telling the story of America to our kids. And the other thing that we've got to do to play offense is we have got to get more charter schools, religious schools as options to parents. So we are the first state in the country to allow a religious charter school to be formed here in Oklahoma. And we have come under tremendous attack from legal groups, from some of our fellow Republicans over this. And I'm a true believer in we have got to provide more options for kids. If a parent wants to send their kid to a Christian school or a school that is of the religious faith or background, I want them to have the ability to do so, not just for people of good income, but I want students in poverty, students from different backgrounds to be able to go to these type of schools, because again, the more options we have for our kids, the better. And the other thing is, do you think that these religious schools are going to do a much better job of making sure that our kids understand the Judeo-Christian values of our country? They're going to understand the founding there. They're not going to have the union presence in these schools. They're not going to be able to be as taken over by these left-wing ideologues as a lot of our other schools. So I believe it's time to play offense. Let's allow religious institutions to start charter schools. Let's get school choice done for every student. And let's continue to move our education system to where it needs to be for the future of the country.
Well, listen, this is just all music to my ears. I hope it's an encouragement to those who listen to this program or watch us on Rumble, because we need to know good things are happening in the midst of the battle. This is the battle, folks. And this is just something that I mentioned earlier, that I wrote a book called If You Can Keep It. It wasn't until late in life that I really understood how it's just utterly central to who we are as an American people, that faith it's indispensable. When you take faith or God out of the equation, you can never have self-government and liberty and all the things that we think are so wonderful. And I've had so many people say to me, I wish I could get that book in every high school in America. And I said, not because I wrote it, but I think to myself, like, once you understand this, it changes everything. You kind of think, oh, now I get it. Now I understand why this is appropriate and why we did this for over 200 years and we stopped doing it. Ryan Walters, honestly, just a joy and an encouragement to talk to you. Got to have you back. Thank you so much. Just terrific.
Thank you, Eric. I'd love to come back. Appreciate all your work.